In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how we can make our basic chord progressions more interesting. And more specifically, I'm going to be showing you the 5 steps where each step makes the progression more and more complex, all by just changing or adding a couple of notes in the composition. And if you want a deeper dive into this, go to 6stepmusic.com/guide. But before we begin, let's first explain what complexity really means when it comes to making chords. Now, practically when it comes to making things more complex, we're either going to be changing the notes in the chord itself, or we're going to be changing the original mode we're in. And for those who don't know, modes are basically the same thing as scales. So there's 7 notes that we base our chords off of. And you can see here that we have all 7 modes right here laid out for you. In this specific case, I'm not going to go into what they're all called. I'm just going to call them the red scale, the blue scale, and etc. But in this specific case, we're going to be basing our scale off of the orange scale, which in this case is the C major scale. So this is what our basic chord progression is going to be based off of, and you're going to see that we're going to make things more complex by either adding or changing the notes of the chords or changing the mode itself. So moving forward, let's go to our basic chord, and you're going to notice that we have our simple chord progression. I'm going to play this right now. Now it sounds pretty basic because of one reason and one reason only. It's because all of these chords basically represent one positive or one negative emotion. So for example, if I play the C major chord, which is the first chord, you're going to notice that it sounds very positive versus the C minor chord, which is very negative. Same thing with the A minor, it's only one negative chord versus the positive chord. Same thing with F major and G major, they're all positive sounding chords. So when we play all these chords, they just sound positive or they sound negative. So the first thing we can do to change it to be more complex is by simply adding a note on top of the chords themselves, like this. Now what this is going to do is it's going to mix 2 chords together. So for example, if for the first chord, I play the C major chord, it sounds positive, but if I add this E minor chord on top of it, it sounds negative versus the A major chord. See how this is positive and this is negative. So when I play this, you're going to notice that it sounds both positive and negative at the same time. And this is the first step of creating that complexity, is just making the chords sound more complex by adding more positive and more negative chords on top of it. Same thing with the A extended chord and the F extended chord and G extended chord. They all have that positive and negative polarity in the chord itself. So when I play this, it's going to sound a lot more complex simply because the chords have more emotions in them. Now in our second step to make things more complex, we basically do the exact same thing. So we add more notes on top of the original chord. Now in this specific case, all we're doing is either adding octaves, which is just playing a note 1 octave above it. So in our first chord, we have our E played an octave above, and then our G played an octave above. And in our third chord, we have this D note right here, which is another extension. So if we go back to our extensions, we have one note, we skip one, and then we have another note, and then we skip one. Then we have another note, skip one, have another note, skip one, until we reach our D notes. And that's our 13th extension. Same thing with the E. This is a 13th extension if we just skip, add all the way to E. So this is just adding more notes on top of the original chord, but either done through octaves or extensions. And again, this makes things more complex because we're adding more positive and negative polarities in the chord itself. So if I play this, it's going to sound a lot more complex than the first step from before. Now for our third step, we could add more notes on top of the chord, but eventually it gets to the point where the chord sounds too busy, so we need to do something else to create that complexity without making it sound too busy. And the best way to do this is to move away from our original mode. So you're going to notice that right now we're basing our scale off of the orange scale, which is this one right here. The warmer the scale, the warmer the colors, means that the lighter the scale sounds. So for example, the orange scale is going to sound a lot lighter than the blue scale. So just know that the warmer it is, the lighter it sounds, the cooler it is, the darker the sound. So instead of basing our chords off of the orange scale, we can switch the scale. So we can switch it to a blue scale right here to make it sound more darker sounding, which moves our composition away from our original mode, which allows it to be more complex. So if I go to our third step, you're going to notice that right now, we're basing our chord off of the blue scale instead of the orange scale. So when I go back to our chords, and I play this, you're going to notice something very interesting about this chord, which is that it's going to sound a lot darker, yet still fit with the same chords and still sound a lot more complex. And this is all making complexity by just changing the mode that we're basing our chords off of. In this specific case, we're changing it to a darker mode. Now the fourth step we can do is actually change the key. Right now we're all basing the modes off the same key, which is the C key right here. And all we're doing is we're just changing from orange to blue. But now instead of changing from orange to blue, you can change the key. So we can change from C to G. We can still use the same orange mode, but just in the G key instead. So if we go back, you're going to notice that again, we're basing our chords off of the G key instead of the C key. It's still the same orange mode, but just in a different key. And then because of that, you're going to notice that this chord is just the same chord as the first chord, but just moved down to the G. So now if I play this, it's going to sound a lot more complex, again, because we're moving away from our original chord. In this specific case, we're moving not too far away, we're just changing the key and not actually changing the mode itself. So if I play this again, it becomes more and more complex as we start moving further and further away from our original mode. The final step that we can do is not only change the key, but also change the mode we're in. You're going to notice that now instead of just changing the key and moving it to the orange G key, we're going to change it to, let's just say, a G Dorian mode, which is the green key right here. So we're now, instead of moving just here, we're going to be moving to here. And what this is going to do is, again, make it a lot more complex because not only are we changing the key, but we're also changing the scale itself. So here's our final step. So instead of basing it off of our G Ionian, now we're basing it off of our G green key. And if I play this, it sounds a lot darker than this G key because again, we're changing the key and changing the mode into a darker mode. And again, this is the most complex you can get because we're changing the mode and the key at the same time while adding notes on top of it as well. Again, if you want a deeper dive into this to understand how these concepts are used to create songs, click the link below this video or go to 6stepmusic.com/guide to get a free guide. And don't worry, it's totally free. It goes straight to the point of what you need to know and takes less than 10 minutes to read. I just hope that you find it useful, and if you have any questions about it, just reach out to us. So go to 6stepmusic.com/guide to get your free guide, and thanks for watching.